Once upon a time, there was a young couple, and they were engaged to be married. Alas, on their way to the church, catastrophe struck, and they were both killed in a tragic accident. St. Peter greeted them at the pearly gates, for they were a good couple, and he asked them how he could make their stay more comfortable. They replied that what they'd really like to do is get married. That's what they were on their way to do in the first place. Was that okay? St. Peter looked a little troubled and said, "Well, I'm not sure how that's supposed to work. Let me see what I can do. Here's a place you can stay while I'm figuring this out." And so he went off and they waited. 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. Wow, whatever could be taking so long? With that much time, they started wondering about what could go wrong, and they became less sure. So when St. Peter came back with the happy news that things could be arranged after all, they said, "Thank you for all that effort. We're sorry, but we've started wondering about what happens if things don't work out. Is divorce allowed in heaven?" At this, St. Peter got really annoyed and said, "Oh, for heaven's sake. It took me 3 months to find a priest up here. Now you want me to find a lawyer?" Since today's gospel is all about marriage, I thought that'd be a fun story to start with. Of course, given today's political climate, there's almost nothing I can say about what we just heard that won't make somebody angry. It's almost like we're fueled more by anger these days than anything else. While I was still in high school, I was friendly with a guy, Dave Houlihan, and he had his life plan clearly mapped out. Well, to be fair, we all did. We all had dreams and saw nothing in the way. I was going to be an actor, Ty was going to join the military and become a flag officer, and Hooli was going to write things that the whole world would read and have to react to, prose that would solicit howls and screams, tears and anger. So he writes error messages for Microsoft now. How do we make sense of what Jesus tells us? That's the question we've been wrestling with for some 2,000 years now, and it doesn't seem like we're a whole lot closer to it than we were back in the early days. Why? Well, I think a lot of it is because we're often so set in our ways that we can't make sense of what God's telling us. Our first reading from Genesis describes a lovely, idyllic partnership. And this is the source material that Jesus goes to when he responds to the Pharisees who are trying to set a trap for him. What kind of trap? Well, the Pharisees, at least the nastier ones, are getting fed up with Jesus and would love it if he were taken care of. So this interchange is taking place beyond the Jordan into Judea, and most likely in land that's under the control of Herod Antipas. He had divorced his wife to marry his half-brother's widow. So the Pharisees are thinking, if Jesus antagonizes Herod enough, Herod will take care of Jesus the same way he took care of John the Baptist, and that will solve this Jesus problem. How often do we see that today? People with leading questions and an agenda behind it. That wasn't the picture in Genesis, though. What we just heard was a perfect partnership, not worrying about appearances, not worrying about status, just perfect harmony. What happened? The fall. Adam and Eve allowed themselves to be tempted by greater status and their own agendas, which led to rivalry among all and among the two of them. Now, notice how Jesus carefully answers questions walking around the trap. He's very careful and gets his opponents to clearly state their positions. Jesus isn't telling people what to do, he's asking what the law that they're following is. And the law that the Pharisees bring up comes from Deuteronomy. Jesus never says that any of these passages are invalid. He replies with a passage from Genesis, directly coming from God. The law, as we learned today, is a compromise because we suffer from hardness of heart. It's the lesser of two evils. Also, that Mosaic law makes a rather drastic assumption that the husband is the master and the wife must be subservient. This is not the partnership that we hear about in Genesis, where Jesus goes to. This is a diminishing of all the equal dignity that we all share as children of God, men and women created equally, sharing equally. What is it in our nature that makes us want to control others? Also, to add some more context, men could divorce their wives for any reason, as Herod did. Women did not have that same right. Jesus challenges that, even though the idea of a woman divorcing her husband at this time was unheard of. Now, plenty of things have changed since Jesus was on earth with us, but a lot of things have just sort of shifted. We've gotten better at seeing women as partners, but I don't know that we're quite there yet. And perhaps the best parallel I can think of is what we don't talk about when we argue about abortion. That's a topic that we just don't talk about. We yell about it. We yell from both sides. We assume from both sides. Neither side assumes the other has anything worthwhile to say, and they must have evil motives. I wonder how many women would rethink their positions if men who helped create a pregnancy were held accountable. If we cared enough about women so that they knew there would be care for her and her child if she was abandoned, a job, childcare, other emotional and physical support. It usually doesn't help things, but we do like to throw blame around. How would things be different if, when we had to throw blame, equal portions fell on the men? What if we changed the way we think to include more mercy? Hey, these folks made a mistake, but at heart, they're pretty good people. Let's see if we can't help them out of this jam. When we rely on laws, we fall to the lowest common denominator, and human lives start to slip through the cracks. Jesus invites us to aspire, to aim high, to know that we're going to fall short, but it's not in the execution, it's in the working for the impossible. There's a story about a Latin American soccer star who gave $30,000 to a charity that was going to bring emergency food to starving orphans in crisis. Well, as it turned out, this was all a scam, and the reporters crowded around the athlete, waiting for an explosion in some really good television. He just smiled. What? You mean there are no starving kids? That's great. That's the level of aspiration that Jesus calls us to today and every day. How do we get there?